skip. So just reset it when you get back because it's preparing. All right, thanks. Appreciate it. All right, thanks, Morgan. It's cool.
Okay, so we would like to welcome everyone here tonight to this work meeting with the Terra Strata Group and with Heber City Council. The reason why we are having this meeting is because our Planning Commission passed with a unanimous vote recommending to City Council about the rezone to do this commercial development and some housing. And before we get to that, we wanted to have some discussion, talk about some things, kind of get some City Council input about how you want to go about doing this. So thank you for coming. And just another thing, this is just a discussion between us. So even though we invite the audience to be here, there really isn't going to be any comments or discussion from the audience, but we are welcome and we appreciate you being here. So this will be amongst those sitting at the table. So we're going to turn some time to Malcolm to get started. And just everybody know everybody here around the table.
Make a quick introduction if you don't mind. So I'm Malcolm Jenkins. Yeah. What's that? Yeah, I'm Malcolm Jenkins. I'm the city planner. You can start over here and work over here.
Mark Wallen with AWA. Brett Wallen with AWA.
Stuart Adams, Terra Strata.
Bryce Wilcox. Jeff Powers, City Council.
Jared Hancock, I'm the Public Works Director.
And Sherry Bingham there. Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for making time on an evening, especially our city council. And we appreciate you guys coming too, but more so our city council. Appreciate you guys cutting some time out for an extra meeting and looking forward to adding some clarity to the project and kind of understanding that a little bit further. So I'll run through some slides, but we'll try and just keep it pretty fluid. So if you want to add comment, there will be discussions throughout each one. Let's have a couple slides and we're going to talk about different pieces of this so we can get started with the process. So as mentioned, we've had a proposed project for quite some time now. This is out of our fiscal impact study, but we have the commercial component you guys should be familiar with, and we have the residential component in the back is yielding 117 units. We can pull up, we can just get a site plan. I'm sure we'll reference it throughout a discussion. Let's make sure that works for us. Sorry, our IT guy came and laid waste to everything, and now we're trying to get logged back into everything. There we go. Oh, there it is. So here's the development proposal that we took through. You see our retail pads here, the Smiths, the fuel center, application for PUD rezone. 1/4 acres along this side and 1/2 acres here. It seems like at some point there was some discussion of doing some thirds here, but it's not fundamental. Just a brief note.
I'm going to scoot around now. Come on, easy.
Oh, I can just look here. I'll just pull this up here. Thanks. The application status, at least in my opinion, we've been filling it best we can, not having done a lot of commercial, but they've applied to amend the zoning. Planning Commission during their preliminary review and, considering the zoning, requested a fiscal impact analysis to help them make their decision more clearly for their recommendation. Planning Commission recommended approval with conditions. We'll talk about that kind of at the end. We'll have their motion and we can dive into that. But we really want to kind of just see what your guys' thoughts are on the project as a whole. Then we can talk about, the Planning Commission's thoughts on it. And then seeking approval to amend the zoning is really where we're at. So it's probably a good time to turn the time over just real quick to Terra Strata for a minute. Do you guys have any other comments on where you're at in the process? any clarity to add to the site or anything, or high level notes?
No, I echo the fact, we appreciate people coming late at night. You know, there's lots of after hour meetings being on the city council. Thank you for being here. And we're very appreciative of the planning commission. They took a lot of time and went through a methodical process. So we're very appreciative for their unanimous vote. Our application, and you can go through some of the conditions, was, like you said, for the half acre, quarter acre, the PUD and the commercial. As they recommended it, I think they recommended mostly a PUD. So we're trying to figure out, that had other conditions involved, senior. And so we're trying to get some guidance as to whether we continue on with the applications we had it, or whether we amend it, or how, just trying to be very respectful of the planning commission and their efforts, but also trying to figure out our application is how we submitted it and whether we need to modify it or not. So that's probably some of the questions we have.
Perfect. Yeah. So at a high level, that's our diligence. I think it was patio homes specifically, but we'll kind of see as I dived into a couple things here, kind of splitting hairs in some ways, but at the end of the day, we just need to see, you know, what we're interested in. So we have some different zones that we have throughout Hooper, some in use, some not, some applicable, some could be, but at the end of the day, I think we can accomplish any of these that you guys are interested in. But just to give you a few high level notes, the patio zone, from my understanding, was most what the planning commission did reference. You can see really the big thing here with any type of rezone is that it meets the purpose of that zone. So I've highlighted the purpose there. You guys are welcome to skim through it, but that's kind of the overarching purpose. A few keynotes, just as I read through it, was it's a 10 to 20 acre with reasonable exceptions. So that would work in this scenario. Even if they took the whole thing as a patio, I think we're about 26, but they're not. They're buffering a little, but it fits. 40% of total acreage would be an open space. There's some discussion there, and we have some ordinance to kind of describe open space, but that's the idea. There's a 5 acre minimum. They do want a playground, pathways with benches and tables at a minimum. And then there are some discretionary density bonuses for adding potential amenities and also meeting moderate income housing. That's all ordinance based and something that the planning commission has mentioned as well. So that's kind of our patio zone at a high level. We also have our PUD zone, which is comparable in nature. It's not as limited to patio home development specifically, as more of a mixed use fill. So you can kind of see the definition here for our PUD zone. A few items there. I would probably, as I read through our ordinance backing it, I would describe it more in the keywords that pulled were common, open space, shared amenities. So it's going to be a little bit more of like maybe something you see over here on West Haven on 4000 there. Our ordinance requires that it serves as a residential buffer to commercial, so it would be applicable in this situation as well. It's similar with density, as you saw, 6 units to the acre, patio and PUD, 40% total acreage in open space. The nice thing about this PUD is our ordinance is pretty robust in describing our residential development plan. I think that's kind of a key component as we consider this, that as we go through in any type of approval, we'll iron out the details and logistics, but we'll want to make sure that, you know, you guys are involved in building out a development plan, a development agreement, so that we all know what this is going to look and feel like and how it's going to benefit the community, and you guys will have involvement throughout that process. But another thought, and just quickly, and I'll turn some time over to discussion, is another one that maybe is more in use currently at a higher level. Well, we have some R4. That one's not applicable as much anymore, but we haven't done a ton of R3, but it's another one that's available to us. It has some duplex ability, 1 for every 10 homes, so 10% duplex capability in our ordinance. That could yield around 90 homes as opposed to about 117 was what they had projected. So those are the 3 that I think are applicable for the residential piece. Are there any questions for me about those 3 before we kind of turn time over to discuss your thoughts on some of these in application?
Maybe this bit of commentary on it a little. Part of the challenge is the sewer station and trying to make it work. And And so part of the density was needed to be able to, I think the LRB mentioned to be able to get enough units to try to help it. It's a fairly good, they had it at 3 preliminary, we hope it comes in at 1 to 2, but we'll have to see, but those are things yet to be determined, but trying to economically handle that is probably one of the bigger things we're dealing with. I think that requires a concerted effort by everyone.
And I don't think that there's not precedence for doing something like a density increase for infrastructure. There's also some ordinance that I ran through today that was pretty robust. It was specific to if someone were to pioneer a vacuum station, we would consider rezones. Obviously we're changed from vacuums. This would be the similar thought though, right? They're pioneering a gravity fed system. But just in the spirit of keeping true to our general plan, I just kind of skimmed through the development part this morning. I just kind of wanted our council to read this because I think it's important with all the work that went into our general plan in light of this. But these were a couple of highlights that I think related to all these developments and how they could be beneficial to Hooper, should it be something we're considering. But 80% view, being able to stay in Hooper through retirement is very important. Lends itself well to either a PUD or a patio home that they could implement a 55 plus type community or retired community. 84% consider it somewhat or very important that their children can remain in Hooper. I think affordability, whether we made it, tried to seek it through density or actually put it in place, I think, it would inherently add some affordability with some density. And then I just thought these statistics were interesting. This was done in our last general plan, but you have our 2010 numbers and our 2019 numbers. You can see that overall Hooper's growing. As we're growing, our median age went up, our household size went up, family size went up, and we have you can see we have a 48% of households with 1 plus person and younger than 18 in Hooper. Households with 1 plus person, 65 plus years or older, 18% of households. And these are 5-year-old numbers, but something to consider. So I wanted to take that into consideration. So I just wanted to have some discussion with that. And like I said, we'll get into what the planning commission can do, but I wanted to hear kind of where our city council thoughts were on these different developments in light of the proposal. Again, the application was for a PUD, but feel free to discuss or ask any questions about them to me or our development team that's proposing it. So.
Well, when you call me, I think you mentioned you put this at the last of the discussion or whatever.
You're welcome to dive into anything. Sure.
So the 3 criteria the planning commission proposed, I know one of them was no CRA.
They're right here for you.
There we go. So you're taking a kind of a real elevated look at the general plan. There's some other issues in there that I think we would need to follow as well. I don't want to miss if there is a PUD development, from my understanding, that the developer is required to supply the infrastructure for that. So there's going to be a conflict there in our general plan. So you'd have to dig a little bit deeper, but I'm pretty sure that's in there.
It's in our general plan or in our ordinances. In our ordinances.
And then another thing, while we're talking about the general plan, I'm just bringing it up so we can have a discussion, so it can be open.
Yeah, for sure. That's the spirit of it.
So I know when the ombudsman gentleman came and gave us a presentation, he was very complimentary that we had a general plan. He did mention that, or he actually said, hey, if you guys are going to deviate from your general plan, you need to get the public's input. I mean, that he was pretty emphatic about that. So when we got that, I don't know if we necessarily check that box or not. So I would like to address, the 3 criteria and see what Terra Strata has to say about the 3 criteria that apply. I think we start there really, because that's the roadblocks there, if there are any. It's those 3 issues that they put on there.
Sure.
So rather than
so just to keep the conversation moving, and I appreciate it for sure. I'm happy, you know what I mean? It's good to talk about all that. I'm not familiar with the PUD portion, but we'll make sure, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we'll just make sure the ordinances are followed, and I think they'll be in agreement, and we'll have to be, right? With the public input, that part's interesting. I wasn't around when this first had comment. I heard it was a lovely meeting, but I didn't get to be there. It was in planning commission. They had a public hearing. That was early in the process. I don't know. We could dive into that a little bit more too, and we'll make sure if we do open the general plan, I do think more public comment, one more public meeting is required, per the ordinance. If we don't open the general plan and you amended zoning, it's up for interpretation. Obviously, we'll just consult with our attorneys, specifically how we need to handle that, but that's kind of my thoughts there.
I
Yeah,
think I'll just jump in and tell you what I like about the project.
sure.
I like the retail pads. I like that a lot. The rest, I'm not sold on. And that's where I'm at. I like the smaller pads out there, and I know everything's got to support one another. It's got to make sense financially and all that, but it's got to make sense for us too as a community. That's where I'm at. I like the retail, the pads, the enormity of the Smiths, and the residential. I'm still not sure about it. So.
Just a couple comments, because I made
Sure.
some notes too with your Bensman. So this is what they said, that a general plan is aspirational document. It is not binding, it is not law, it is a vision. And what we're trying to do with a general plan is how do we meet objectives and minimize the trade-offs? So that's what we're trying to do with our general plan. We're trying to say, okay, what are the objectives for the city? And then how do we do that and make sure that we're, having everything with the trade-offs? So I think, when we come to a general plan, it's something that, yes, and there was a lot of work that was done on the general plan, but we're really trying to make it be, what can we do best here for the Hooper City residents? And it is a vision. A general plan is a vision. Like I said, it's an aspirational document.
So maybe suggest a few things that you guys can think about. That we read the general plan, and everybody has it. And the general plan, the residential area, I think is like acre lots, I think in this area or something like that. Or
3/4. Yeah. Yeah. That's the current or the
But
future.
then the general plan also it says you got commercials 5,500. And generally, when a city does that, there's not enough volume, or you don't want it. You don't want commercial sprawl in your city, just all the way up and down 5,500, because it becomes a little bit anemic. You get too many businesses, none of them drive, none of them do well. The traffic patterns don't work, so it's laid out in 2 miles of commercial. So generally, we're looking for a commercial node, but you zone the entire road because you don't know where that node's going. Market's got to tell you where the node's going. And that's what we've done. We've worked with users, and they've done economic studies, and they say this is a good spot for that commercial zone. So when you find out where the commercial is going to be, then your general plan says that around that commercial is where you want your more dense housing. And so even though, so you've got a little conflict in your general plan, one that says 3/4 acre lots, and one that says when you locate your commercial, that's a good spot for your density housing. So I guess you could read it either way, but I think it's pretty clear, at least the way we read it, that if you locate your commercial here, which we hope you would, you probably ought to have more dense housing around it. And that's the spot where you ought to have them. So we think we follow the general plan. We think it fits within the general plan. Probably, we don't think it needs to be amended, but that's our opinion. And we surely respect differing opinions. But, and knowing that, the other challenge we had was that we're not the only potential landowner in Hooper. There's a lot of other landowners, people that want to build for their kids, or people that want to build and develop subdivisions. But in talking to the other landowners in the very early times when the other mayor was here, we met with some of the landowners, if you remember, and there wasn't enough housing units to justify a $2 million sewer lift station. And so somehow you've got to have enough units, just the math, to be able to make it work. And so what I guess my suggestion is you've hired LRD to look at the economic impact, that there are really, really good, smart people that know how to help with city infrastructure and how to fund it and how to make it work with projects like this. And it may not be bad to bring some of them in and let them give you some of their ideas along with LRB. And because quite frankly, if you can't pay for the sewer lift station, the project's dead. And that's just how it is. And if you can't, if it just doesn't work, you gotta make dollars work in order to build something. And that's economics of whether you're building a house and can't afford the mortgage payment, or whether you're doing anything else, you have to make the numbers work. And so we would love to try to help do that, but the sewer lift station is a big challenge for the city, and it's for us too. We'd like to make an attempt to try to solve that, but the density would probably help us. And we think it fits within the general plan. That's it's going to be.
We actually have, and we have copies of a summary from your general plans that we provided to the planning commission. We'd be glad to provide that. I think for the most part, we wanted to be here to listen and hear what your concerns were, hear what your ideas are, and we truly believe that meets, just as Stuart's indicated, the general plan and pulled excerpts out of the general plan and the vision of how it fits. And as the mayor's indicated, it is vision of.
I hand these out too.
Yeah.
I take one home with them and then get
Yeah, I
your
was gonna say,
perspective at least on.
When you have trouble going to sleep.
Yeah, so yeah, there you go, read it up. We'll definitely dive in. Like I said, I'm not trying to beat around the bush. We have a recommendation from our planning commission. I want to dive into that, and I may have just thought of it differently. It probably need to be viewed synonymously, but I feel like if we don't have a project, then I'm not as worried about, you know what I mean? Like if there's no general plan alignment and there's no interest in opening, or then I don't know, but there's two thoughts there. If you don't have a sewer infrastructure, then it's both ways. So we can do this, and we'll definitely discuss the planning commission's conditions and have that. But I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts again more on, obviously we might not fully know, you guys were there when they wrote the general plan, but your thoughts on the alignment with the general plan, a dense project like this in Hooper. Like I said, I kind of laid out 3 potential density ones. Any of those seem more aligned with the general plan or not? I just want to know your guys' thoughts.
My thought is on this lift station. There's been others that have, well, every development is either redeveloped. It's come in, developers pay for that. We know we had a person from the county come explaining these different ways of creating income. But in every case, someone had their taxes increased or someone was paying for it. In some cases, it wasn't the whole city of Hooper, but it might have been those that are within this district, those that would be using the lift station. And that's the part that I'm wondering, why should the city pay for this, or why should our residents pay for it when we individually haven't done that in the past? Whoever comes in and wants to develop something like that, they pay for it.
Which tax mechanism are you thinking about?
He gave us 3. There was like a CRA,
Okay.
which was like a taxing district. Or maybe you'll have to tell me, but
CRA is taxing. It's kind of the best way to describe it is a tax rebate. So the property taxes generated by this project would pay for those improvements.
So to give you an idea.
but it would be just in that area.
Yeah.
No, it's the difference in tax. So trying to think of the best way to explain it, and I'm not very good, but I'm gonna try, okay? And then somebody else can jump in and make it better, but if the taxes on this property were $1,000 a year, I don't know what they are, let's say $100,000 a year. the way it is. It stays $1,000 a year in the school district and county and mosquito abatement and the city get their tax portion of that $1,000. And then if nothing can be built because they can't get a sewer lift station, they get $1,000 and there's no additional benefit. But whether it's CRA or an RDA redevelopment, an LD, they're both pretty much the same. Many times the school district or the county or whoever's getting the increase will say, we think we want to see a project built because if we give up part of our tax base of the new project for 10 or 15 years, after 10 or 15 years, we get the additional tax. So let's say you built Homes or Smiths on it and the taxes on it were 100,000 a year. I don't know if they're that high, but it'd be ridiculous a little bit. So the difference in the 90 and the 100 is $90,000. The school district says, I'll give up $90,000 for 10 years to get that sewer lift station or get some other improvement built. Because after 10 years, what do I have? I get $90,000 a year. So it isn't a tax increase. It's simply giving up the increment, the increased tax for a period of time to be able to get that tax increase forever. And am I explaining it right?
Yeah, I call it a rebate because it's a little easier
But there's no
to
tax, there's no
understand.
tax increase. It's just simply reallocating it from the county or the school district to the city for the lift station. And once that's paid for, then they get the full tax. And so that's one way to do it. And some lift stations cost 2 or 3 million. Some are not that much money, but when you get one this size, it's pretty hard for a developer to take it, or other developers probably would have done it for us.
Ryan, I was gonna say, will you explain a little bit, because you've done this with the fire?
Yeah. And entities will come to us for that, the same thing, at whatever percentage, 70, 80, 90, one asked for 100%. We thought that was crazy, but, each individual board or committee, those entities, the school district, fire board, mosquito board, county, all these different taxing entities, each individually have to approve that. And there's no guarantee that they're going to do that. Now, the fire board's turned some down. We've approved some. I don't know, I can't speak for the mosquito district and I can't speak for the county or the school district. So we don't know if they're going to approve our request for that. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a hope, I guess. It's kind of a hope that we're gonna get that money allocated for that period of time. But historically speaking, fire board has probably approved 90% of the requests that have come through us.
What's the iteration they did?
And I didn't explain it very well because I assumed it was 100%. But almost all of them are 50 or 70%. So the school district's still getting a lot of money, but they're just not getting 100% of it, or the mosquito abatement, but they give it up for a period of time.
And the duration is the request is for the percentage and the duration time for that tax to be diverted.
And that's why a development agreement's kind of a good idea, because you'd rezone it, but you wouldn't rezone it. You'd rezone it contingent upon, because nobody knows what they'll do. And if that happens, the rezone falls into place. If it doesn't happen, we don't get our rezone. So that's kind of, you don't want to rezone something and not get something built. And we don't want the rezone if we can't build it. So it's kind of a help to both of us.
Have you guys reached out? Because I know there's several property owners there that are kind of waiting for this lift station so they can continue their development. Have you reached out to any of them for participation in this?
Two of them,
Well,
are
they willing to help fund it?
yeah, I think they would pay their share, but once the commercial entity came there, the station, right, well, considerably bigger than what it would have taken. Or is it? Would
We,
that,
we've never really done anything with commercial. My understanding is like, we could pioneer that and then we would do a impact fee analysis. And they'd set a fee, so anybody, these other developers, if they wanna build, they pay per lot and that money goes back to whoever pioneered the.
So one thing LRB didn't put in their study was that exactly that if there's a way to pay for the lift station, you know, whatever our participation, we'd have to participate, the CRA would probably do something if we couldn't get to the full amount. But the city would probably own that lift station. Unless you wanted us to own it, we don't want it, okay? But you would have those impact fees on that lift station, so everybody that hooked onto it would be paying the city whatever the proportionate share of their, whatever the analysis says is their share. So that would be revenue coming into the city, that would be additional revenue coming in. You understand what I'm saying? You'd have that impact fee come in, and it would already be, if the CRA works, it may not work, but that would already been paid for through the CRA, so that'd be additional money coming into the city that would have offset additional infrastructure. You follow that?
yeah, I do, except if there's an additional expense, though, it's not like if there's just revenue that doesn't have an expense along with that.
Yeah,
So
so,
it would have-
when you set those, tax increment agencies up and collect them, you're allowed, there's a 10% administrative fee that's set aside in that agency, and that would be set up, the city council would be the board or the governing board for that agency, and you would have, that money would be set aside. There's also, I believe, a housing component, for some affordable housing that's part of that. I'd have to look at it again. But my recollection is there's a 10% administrative fee to cover those costs that stays with the city in that process.
But again, who pays for that? When we're talking about revenue
So,
that's coming in, but who is
So-
actually going to pay for
so the
it?
people that pay for it, the people that use it, that hook onto it.
Were you talking about the tax increment or?
Well, no, the taxing,
Okay,
you know, I don't know how the school board looks at that, you know, but one reason you only get, let's just say that $1,000 a month is because it's been a farm, right? And there's really not any type of special requirements that someone's had to take care of, you know, we haven't had to build roads through it for the farm, you know. So there is a special taxing, like greenbelt taxing, for the county, because there's not things that you have to do to take care of that piece of ground, which all that really changes once you start developing. There's things that have to be taken care of, whether it's roads, sewer, water, electricity, you know. I'm not saying, again, I just go back to the fact that it's just not clear to me why the city or its residents. Now, if they're going to pay this back with an impact fee that is comparable to anywhere else where they would build, then I can kind of see that. But if it's not, if it's going to be more than that because of the size of it, I'm not sure why the developer, why you're not paying for this upfront. And then let the impact fees pay you back.
Probably the size of it, and maybe there's others that have $2 or $3 million. $2 or $3 million.
I don't know if you get too.
4 million and that's fine, but that was only, their development was about 45 lots, and then they have some adjacent ground that will pay impact fees to, they'll recoup their costs.
you know, the state of Utah has exaction laws that they've put in place
Yeah.
because of this exact situation. In other words, the cities and government agencies can only place burdens on new development that are exactly appropriated to that development. In other words, to build a lift station that has, let's just say, it's 3 times the capacity of the project. Our project, as far as commercial goes, has very limited impacts to a lift station. The residential would have more impacts to the lift station.
We have a couple of restrooms, no showers, no, But- So, and I'm not an attorney, but there's a famous case called Banbury. And it was a developer who was required to put in an oversized road in his project. And he said, no, it's in the city. And it's the case that everybody quotes, Utah Supreme Court ruled that developer was only responsible to pay for the what they call project costs, the costs within the project. He wasn't required to pay for the entire city's costs. And so that's what gave rise to impact fees. Because the city said, well, I can't pay for those without extracting an impact fee because that road is oversized, and even though it's in front of his development, other developers have to pay for that road. And so then they said, well, you could charge another developer that doesn't have an arterial road in front of them an impact fee to pay for the road in front of that developer's side. So that's what actually gave, I guess, the legal right to collect impact fees from someone. And that's out of my wheelhouse. So you got to talk to maybe your attorney and talk about that. But there are some restrictions on what you can exact from a developer. Even though some may have paid it, it probably isn't right. You probably need to be careful about it.
Well, there was an impact study done on one there.
Yeah, they just paid their portion and then at the overage, the bigger portion, but like you're talking about, they get paid back for.
So just a thought, a question.
I would like to go to work on this.
Yeah, so I don't know. So say just, and I don't even know if this is even a possibility, but say if it comes back and it is 2.5 million. And the most expensive one we've ever done has been 1.5 million. And that was primarily from the housing, which this, like you mentioned, the biggest component that's going to need the sewer is actually the housing. So, and Ryan, maybe you could answer this, but like the CRA probably will not and probably isn't expected to cover that whole entire amount. Like I would think like maybe the CRA would cover 1.5 million of it. Then we do the impact fee. So they only maybe come to the fire district and say, we only want X amount. And then the other portion of it, then they do their sewer impact study, and those houses then would be paying for the additional, which is what they would do in any subdivision anywhere here in the city. So those houses are not going to be required to pay for the whole entire impact, only the impact, like you said, for their houses. So do they do combinations like that? And I thought that maybe they do, that part of it is CRA and part of it is impact with the houses. I don't know, that's it.
Especially if you throw the affordable housing in there. I mean, it doesn't seem right that we're trying to build more affordable housing for people that want to retire there, young couples. And then because of the taxing, they pay more than anywhere else in the city.
Yeah, I think, to answer that best I can, I think the real challenge is the upfront funding is, I think it's fairly easy to, whether you have impact fees or connection fees and so forth. As those housing units come online, that's a fairly easy thing to do. To be able to come up with cash ahead of time is the challenge. And that's the reason these taxing entities are very successful, is because it provides an opportunity to provide the funding and then allow those funds to be repaid back into the system. That's the best way I can say it, Dave.
Yeah.
And so that's one question I would have. So how do they come up with the full funding up front when it may take 5 years, it may take 10 years to through whether it's through the school board or, you know. the
Typically, there's a
fire.
bonding, it's a revenue bond mechanism.
So it's basically taking out kind of a loan that they'll pay off with their, what would have been the taxes that they would have collected.
Yes.
And there's another tool out there that's called and I've never done one, but it's a PID.
PID.
And it allows, let's say, a project area to increase their own property tax. And then bond against that increase in property tax and pay for the infrastructure up front, and then the property tax pays for it over time. The people within that project are paying a higher tax. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not. We talk about affordable housing, but what we ought to do is we're trying to figure out a way to move forward, then bring the experts in and then let you start making decisions as to what you think is the best way and then what we think is feasible and how we can make it work. And that's kind of what we're trying to figure it out.
So as you mentioned, if we can come up with some kind of a zoning agreement, then that zoning agreement could be dependent upon then if we can come up with some kind of a CRA or some kind of financing. And if not, then like you said, you don't want to zone it if you can't do it. We don't want to rezone it if you're not going to do it. So, but we at least have to somehow come up as a council a decision of what we even want to do, what kind of zoning would be agreeable to.
Maybe we can talk just a bit about what a development agreement is. I mean, most developments of this type, we do a development agreement with the city, and it basically outlines what you've agreed on. Okay, so what the developer's going to participate in, how it's going to get built, any conditions that would be upon it. So it's a document that the project has to live with. And so I think it's really helpful in this situation where you haven't done commercial development. It can bridge a lot of gaps. And it's a really good tool and mechanism. But I think the biggest thing for the city would be to know that if we can't comply with everything that's in the development agreement, then the zoning has really no enforceability.
And we're looking for, again, a little guidance. Before Malcolm, I can't remember who.
Brian was the city engineer.
Brian felt like that there at least ought to be enough density in the residential. He thought it was an idea anyway, it wasn't. So, there needed to be where the commercial removed part of the residential density, that probably is allocated to the rest of the ground. There needs to be some resolve because your big problem's the residential, but I understand that, but there needs to be some resolve with that residential for us moving forward. And again, our application was 1/4 acres on the west, 1/2 acres lots north, a PUD in the middle. The planning commission's recommendation was PUD over the whole thing, I think, or something like that. I don't want to speak for them, that's what I heard.
Yeah,
So,
there is.
or CRA or whatever.
They recommended the developer explores PUD and patio zoning designations, considering a 55+ community for the entire residential area. So that'd be 26 acres.
Our PUD. The planning commission might think that we weren't respectful of them and we ignored their recommendation and just came with our own. If we come in with their new recommendation, you might think, well, we've changed our mind and we're not, and we're kind of not consistent. We don't have integrity. We're changing things in mid-course. We're looking for direction so that we can be respectful of the planning commission and yet go through with our application. We're kind of not knowing what to do exactly that way.
How do you feel about that recommendation?
I think a PRD overlay is a pretty good border redevelopment. The 55 and older, if you looked at the data, it would be tough, I think, to market. I don't think it would, the demand would be there, but if you combine trying to get affordable housing, which if you go back to that slide that had the data on it, back, even to the survey.
Oh, there you go. Oh, that was it.
What
That's our-
What have the areas of us or?
84 and 85.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, we definitely have demand for both. That's your point. We have a large population and actually we have kind of a smaller population of 65 plus, right? We have a larger population of younger families, households, though. But I mean, that was the demographic at 2019. And so there's demand for both for sure. And we do have we have a 55 plus that's done well, but there's definitely demand for both. We don't, and that's kind of what we're talking about and we'd have to get pulse on that probably, but
If we could do both, that would be something we would, I think would be very productive. It would satisfy, I suppose, 80% of the one area and 84 in the other area of the band. And I think it would give, usually in a PUD or the city council usually has more oversight on it if you're approving, some of even the architecture. You can have that.
yeah, if you compare ordinances, and I don't want to act like the expert, but I read through them pretty good today and, in the past. And when you compare ordinances, our patio home one is a little bit more limited. We could definitely do a patio home development and you could put a 55 plus community in either. The way I read them, patio homes seem to kind of lend themselves to that better. That's kind of what we did over in Country View, but I do think we have more robust ordinance surrounding our PUD. There's more flexibility. We could maybe accomplish more, but it's just a thought. It really depends on what you guys were here to build the general plan. I've read through it, but we want to make sure the spirit of it is met. And so,
but I think something important that as it relates to the PUD discussion. So one of our main intents for including the PUD in our original plan was to allow for the flexibility to meet the needs and requests of the city. So it was actually an effort on our part to allow the flexibility to figure out what the city wanted, and then to have the flexibility to make that happen without maybe some of the more restrictive components of some of the other zoning. So I think that intent maybe has been a little bit lost in some of this discussion. It's certainly another component of it was to ensure we got the density to unlock the CRA funding, but really one of the main, if not the main component, was to allow that flexibility to work with the city. And so I think we're open to, again, getting direction on what the city's looking for and then aligning to that. I think we're just trying to figure out what makes the most sense for what the requirements and needs of the project are, but also with what the city's looking for with that area.
I wanted to just kind of give my comment on a couple things. We've got our patio zone, we've got our PUD, we've done some, but a PUD, I don't know if that's ever actually occurred. We also have, like I said, I think an R3 could be stretched. We'd have to get some feedback and thoughts there, but I think an R3 could be stretched. That feels a little more similar to what Hooper's done, right? We've done development agreements for single family home developments, and they're, single family homes on a lot. They're smaller lots, but they're, 30 acres in nature. I guess at the end of the day, as we explore them, especially as we consider a PUD, and I just wanted you to kind of understand where staff's coming from, because we don't always get to communicate with you guys as much either. You're only here for, in and out for councils and stuff. But if we went with a PUD or a patio home, I think the development agreement's key. They're very on board with working with us to do one, but that's going to be a lot of work for the staff, which it's our job, and we're happy to do it. I just don't want to burn a lot of city resources, right? I mean, I'll be bugging Jared a lot. I'll be bugging Brandon a lot if we go down this path further, right? And we'll be working with them. We'll have some work meetings like this. We'll want your involvement, etc. But I just want to make sure that that was the spirit of this, was that we have a good direction so that we don't chase our tail, if that makes sense. Yeah. So, and this is new to us, right? So I think if we had really robust ordinances, that would give them some assurance. Like, oh, this meets their commercial development standard. They did one next door. We're doing the same thing. We're going to go put a bunch of money into developing the concept, the conceptuals, the traffic study, et cetera, et cetera. They'd go do that, bring it to us, and have pretty strong assurance of it's going to get approved. That's a little different for Hooper, right? We don't have a precedence for saying, yeah, if you meet everything, you're going to approve. We got to build that out in some type of agreement. And so that's kind of the spirit of maybe where staff's coming from with this. Want to make sure we're putting resources where the city wants them put. So,
Can I just say,
please.
I've talked to a lot of community members, residents about this whole deal. And I guess the number one thing that gets brought up in my conversations with people is, where's Plan B? Where's Plan C? Why Smiths? Why is this being an option? Why are we stuck with that? Why isn't there another idea? And case in point, there's a Smith's 4.3 miles that direction, and another Smith's 4.5 miles that direction. So I almost feel like we put a Smith's in the spot, we're creating a monopoly for Smith's somehow, because there'll be 3 of them within 4.5 miles. People aren't excited about the Smith's idea, as I talk to people, I'll be honest with you, I represent the city as a whole, Dale and I do. And people don't like the idea. I think a better idea that people would like and represent is something that stands out, that people drive to our city to come to. Like, I drive to Costco 10 to 12 miles in South Ogden because I like to go to Costco. If there was something here that people would drive 10 to 12 miles from West Haven and West Point to Syracuse to come to, they're not gonna drive here to go to a Smith's, right? They're not gonna drive here to go to the McDonald's. My vision or concept would be a smaller grocery store with more commercial paths, like Bryce said, it's more restaurant opportunities with an open space to enjoy that space rather than just a commercial conglomeration. That traffic comes and goes and comes and goes, but a meeting place, gathering place where people can enjoy a meal together and have a smaller grocery store. I mean, I understand this thinking is out there. I can imagine a Trader Joe's there and a 6 or 7, 8 nice little restaurants to sit down at, where people would come to our community to enjoy that space from their community, rather than just a drive-by, oh, let's stop at a grocery store, there's another grocery store. You know, that's the number one thing that, as I talk to people, they're not excited about this. You know, I'm sorry, but Smith's and McDonald's is dull and boring. Let's think of something that's exciting and inviting, that brings people to our city rather than, oh, I could go anywhere to go to Smith's, if that makes sense. So, I mean.
Well, I think to
So
boil
why-
that, boil that down to, Yeah, go ahead.
Where did the Smiths idea come from? Number one, why are we not entertaining another idea? Why are we stuck on that from the beginning? Why wasn't there other ideas put forth?
I think to boil that down to maybe like general plan and ordinance to make sure we're acting in the realm of, you know, cause I appreciate the comment and I understand it for sure.
I think what he's trying to say is you guys are negotiating the best deal for you guys.
Yeah.
And as city council members, we need to keep our residents' mind, we need to do the same. So hopefully somewhere in the middle, we can come up with something that works well for everybody. Do we need commercial? Yeah, I agree. I think another hurdle in the LRB study, it states that for the first 3 years, you know, we'll go in the hole. And so who's gonna pay for that? So the city has to, for at least the first 3 years, come up with some money out of our budget to get this thing up and moving. Is that fair? I don't know. And then another comment, Nick, Brian, would you be open to partner with another developer as well to help the project out? I'll just throw an idea out there. I don't even know if it would work, but I know there's a high demand for it. I don't know the economics of it. I know Ryan Smith is offering $500,000 to build an ice rink, you know, for 20 communities. I know people that are in that space that travel a long ways. You know, I would be inclined to give you some pretty high density, something that would be a destination, like Ryan says, a destination where people can come and recreate and spend their money, you know, on these other paths, and also live there too. Yeah, I would like to see something else as well, you know, something a little more creative, but nonetheless, that's what you guys have that are offering. So now you wanted to know what we thought. And so now it's a little more in the open of how we're thinking as well. But yeah, we do need commercial. I totally agree. You know.
So a couple of thoughts I have. I haven't talked to anybody, but again, maybe I'm in different circles. I haven't talked to one person that isn't excited for Smith's. In fact, I spent my weekend down at the cemetery and I had numerous people came up to me that said, okay, how soon is Smith's going to be here? So I've had a lot of people that are in favor, but I'm not saying that the people you talk to aren't telling you that, Ryan. I'm sure they are. I'm just telling you the people that I'm talking to. And all of you have been sitting in your positions a lot longer than I have. We have not had one other place come to Hooper that wants to come to Hooper. You know, people mentioned Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's did not want to come to Hooper. We were never ever a consideration. People threw that out there. Why aren't we getting a Trader Joe's? Trader Joe's didn't come to Hooper and say we want to come. I'll tell you, I have contacted Buc-ee's twice. If you have ever been to a Buc-ee's, it's the funnest place I've ever been. Buc-ee's doesn't.
Travel center.
Buc-ee's do not want to come to Hooper.
They won't, 'cause
They
it's on
don't.
the freeway.
You're right.
We're not.
So-
We're not a travel through. city.
Well, we will be when West Weaver corridor, but we're not today. You're right. We're not. So some of these places, Costco is not going to come to Hooper because Costco wouldn't even go to Washington Terrace. That mayor fought and fought for years and years to try to get Costco to Washington Terrace, and they wouldn't because it was not traveled through enough, as was on Riverdale Road. So you ask, and you probably all know this because you were here and I wasn't. When Smith was first presented to you to come, they're the ones that want to come to Hooper. And you're right, Bryce, we need some commercial. We absolutely need some commercial. And even if there are Smiths and other places, you know, we know that's who wants to come to Hooper.
I think one way to more black and white discuss it, right? Because I appreciate the opinions and they're important. You guys are communities and you represent the community. Like as you read through our general plan, the big concept, and correct me if I'm wrong, though, is local mom and pop type establishments, especially at, I think it called out 55 and 55. You guys used to have a pizza shop down there. No, a burger joint. You had a burger joint down there. Is that right?
And both, yeah. And a pizza shop.
So I understand the spirit of that. And I'm not saying it's wrong. And so there could be a discussion of that. There could be a discussion of, and maybe that's more factual, like this doesn't align with our general plan potentially. And that's probably more how I would view it. And that could be a point. But then, like you said, I don't know, maybe I don't know when those come back I don't know. I'm not that.
People tell me they don't like Smith's because it's expensive.
Uh-huh.
They'll drive by Smith's to go to Winco every single time.
Hmm.
Because a necessity, people want to pay the lowest price for it. Groceries, food is a necessity. They don't care about the glam, they want the lowest price. And that's not Smith's.
So your questions are really good ones, and I'll try to answer, okay? Why Smith's, why not Associated Foods, why not Kent's, why not Trader Joe, why not Walmart, why not?
I have the heat plans.
And the reason is because Smith's want to come. And I haven't heard from, Trader Joe's. I talked to them a lot, like with Kaysville, Riverdale. I mean, Riverdale Road, they went to. And and you know why they went there. And, nobody needs to talk about Riverdale Road, there it's there. But, so it's just pretty obvious. And Walmart's got a project in West Haven. West Haven there has contacted Smith's. They got an older site they'd like to have Smith's go to because they're after Walmart and Smith's. Kansas up the street, Winco's around the corner. This, you articulated very well the reason Smith's want to be here is this, even though it's 4.5 miles, this is a whole, the closest, they got a store to Sunset, but it's like you've got one side of it is you 4 or 5 seem close, but that's the perfect spacing for stores. And if Winco were 4.5 miles away or Walmart was 4.5 miles away, they wouldn't want to be here. But Winco's a couple of miles and Walmart's back out of sight just up the street that they have to build on. So the answer really quickly is just that Smith's want to be here. And so you've got a user that wants to come. Your decision is, do you want it or not? Because if there were somebody else knocking at the door, we'd like to talk to them. And if you have somebody, we talk to them. You're probably not going to get, and we did the Smiths in Kaysville, and I'll share with you the numbers that the guy who does the big store, who does the county for Kaysville, gave me their numbers and gave me the numbers for Bowman's and for for Smiths, I probably don't want to give them out for public meetings. But I can tell you that Smiths was probably triple Mo's as far as, tax revenue. And I don't know what kind of tax revenue you get off of Ninth Street. But probably, it may be good. I don't know. You just have to look to see what revenues you want in the city and what you're trying to accomplish. But the bottom line is Smiths want to be here. And there's only so many grocery stores in the market. Winco, Associated Foods, and Walmart is pretty much it. And if you don't have a Walmart, you don't have an Associated Food, you don't have a Winco that want to be here. Maybe Trader Joe's, but they're not coming. So you got Smiths, and that's, you can look at it as a good or a bad thing, but they want to be here. And that's why we're knocking on the door.
Well, I think just for the sake of, the city's standpoint, right? It's not Smith's, it's our zoning that you guys have created, right? We want to stay true potentially to our zoning, and with that can be the discussion of many, and it's also the general plan, right? What we've envisioned that is normally supported by our zoning. So is this C1? Is it C2? That's the discussion, right? C1's more local, mom and pop. C2 is more, you get what I'm saying. So that's saying, I don't care if it's Smith's or Walmart, it doesn't matter to me. It's just if it meets the spirit of your general plan and you guys, what we're representing. But again, I don't.
Well, you can do anything with the general plan. If
Yeah.
you've got a concept like, and the citizens like, the general plan, the sky's the limit. We can adapt the general plan. It's just, we have a concept that we like.
For sure. For sure.
Very good question.
Yeah, that's where we're at. For sure, that's the discussion. I guess if you guys are good on kind of that portion, we could dive into a little bit more though on, if it meets general plan. And again, I agree, we could adapt the general plan, we cannot, but I think the general plan really gives us our basis for what we approve as a city or not, right? Like I do developments all day with Jared. Well, if someone comes in and they have the right per the general plan to do something, they're doing it. And that's what you guys have represented is okay in the city. Well, that's kind of where we're here with this is, determining is the general plan what represents the city right now, or is it something we want to consider more? But we can have more discussion there, but also we could dive in and just kind of read through these real quick. We only have about 20 more minutes, and then we could have a little Q&A as well. It's just get at the end of more, but I don't know, did we want to go through these a little bit more? Is that helpful, or do you feel like we've hit them pretty good? You think you've hit them pretty comfortably, the different conditions? I mean, we really talked the CRA pretty thoroughly. We didn't mention anything about an anchor store being completed before residential units. I think that's, it comes from our planning commission. I think it'd be pretty pertinent that you guys flesh that out at least a little bit in discussion. And again, I know it's not, but.
So is that, you tell us, is that reality?
That'd be really hard to do. I think we do it simultaneous. We're not trying to build the residential without the commercial without the residential. But you've got to have your roads, your sewer, everything else function together, your utilities, your infrastructure. And you've got to be able to find a way to financially make it work. And without doing them together, I think financially that would be hard to do. Just to be honest with you. I think if we.
I don't know if you guys have a discussion with the planning commission. I haven't on, what the spirit of that was. I mean, there's some logic there to draw.
I think the logic was, just perception is go ahead and rezone that to residential and get that all done. Yes, that's, I'm sorry, can't do it, it's not gonna work.
Would there
And
be,
that's just not, I mean, so that's, I think that was the thought process by putting that in there. I don't know, but I think.
would there be some reasonable milestones on both sides you could put in the developer's agreement that
Absolutely.
that's the way to handle
But
that?
that would be hard. To have the milestones, yeah. I think the following 10 that you follow.
You feel like kind of flesh that out a little more, Jared. So we'd have our developers agreement, we'd have our residential piece, we'd have our commercial.
Like you said, a lot of the infrastructure will have to happen to support either. So maybe you phase the development and say you need to have phase 1 done and then so much of the commercial to get phase 2. I think there's a number of ways you could work out.
I get what you're
the
saying.
timing of it.
Most communities, once we have plans in to build the commercial, so the anchor, once the anchor comes in, they know they're gonna have a commercial development. You're gonna get what you're looking for. Typically, that's kind of the trigger is once you know that you've got plans in, then you proceed with building permits for both. So you can build them at the same time.
It's kind of the general fear that come in, build all the residential, get the density, and then, never mind on the Smiths, that kind of stuff.
So you have you kind of have a leveling factor, and that's not too much about it maybe, but it is the challenge, it's a sewer station. And you're gonna have both to pay for it. I mean, whether you put it in development agreement or not, the economics have to be there. The commercial will have a tough time without residential, just as they can't, you can't merge that commercial, even though it's diesel. And same with the residential, there's no way to put 20 acres residential and get it to the lift station to pay for. So I mean, you're gonna, that lift station is going to be the deciding factor as to whether, how it goes in and what happens. And that's probably the thing we're gonna have to put the most of. Okay,
And the bad part, it has to be functional before even one unit could be.
exactly right. So you're gonna have to have both. Yeah, but I think to say you're gonna do the commercial and start on the residential, that just economically doesn't make sense. Okay.
And for what it's worth, you never say never, right? But it's highly unlikely that Smiths would decide not to come in, right? The amount of work and effort that it takes to get these projects set up and ready to go, it would take some cataclysmic event or equivalent to cause something like that to not happen. So, as much as that, for what it is worth, I mean, Brett has worked with Smiths for decades now, and I mean, these projects are, when they're committed. So we're totally open to talking through phases and things like that, but it's extremely unlikely, not impossible, because everything's always possible, but extremely unlikely that Smiths, for whatever reason, barring a catastrophic event, would say, yeah, we're just not interested anymore. So.
Do any of you have any thoughts as far as what you'd like to see with the housing? No one really gave any suggestions, like as far as,
Be sure different than anything we've done in the past, right?
I think the 55 plus community, I think one's been highly successful and popular. I mean, it's built out.
Do you guys think there's enough demand? I don't know. I have a question. I'm just wondering what your guys' thoughts are. Do you think there's enough demand, like you mentioned?
They're all sold, they're all lived in.
Those ones are also,
Demand is pretty quick, once they build.
because how many would we be looking at? It'd be about 90, right? We got, yeah, I think it's 90 and we've got 40 at Country View. So that'd give us 130. It's something I could definitely look into as well, send an email, but it's a great assumption.
I think the max is 20 acres.
Mhm.
this would be about 120 patio.
So some of that other, so I think you guys have 26 acres to build with.
Yeah, they do.
Somebody around, so something else would have to, whether it's open space or.
Yeah, if you guys are comfortable with that assumption, I mean, run with it. I would definitely look at the higher level Hooper data, like where, I mean, I'm from Plain City, right? I live in Plain City. We have 155 plus community and that's all as well. And I heard talk some more, but maybe, I don't know, maybe there's more demand than that, but I think we could definitely pull the data and get more comfortable with it. Yeah.
People will join the community. I like it.
Yeah, I understand the draw for them.
One thing that I know the community around this area, I know that they've talked about, up next to their spaces, they would like to see comparable spaces on next to them. So like if they're on a third acre, they would like to see along their area, third acres as well, or half acres or something like that along the north edge. Just to kind of have a buffer zone, so to speak, against the higher density housing.
That sounds fun.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, that's basically, that's how. Then the planning commission, as I understand it, I don't want to speak for them, but as I understand what they said, was that the brown and the blue, they wanted green. Basically, planned unit development, not planned unit development. They wanted the whole thing planned unit.
So there wouldn't be
There wouldn't be the buffer, so that's the question.
That's been the planning commission. They mentioned that somewhat. It is important to note, right, with the planning commission. I mean, it was in the meeting. It was like 3 people for, one portion, 3 for another. The motion did carry unanimously, I believe, for what was the one we've read here, but that was staff. It was way before me. I went back through, this was Brian, a little bit of Jared, a little bit of, I don't know who was mayor at the time, but that was some staff recommendation. I would hope you take them synonymously, because I think it's a good idea. The buffer sounds logical, but
They would just,
And we agreed to go 3rd acre, wanted on that, but that's where the discussion was, in the planning commission last fall, I think somebody said, well,
That's like the west boundary.
you like the idea though of the buffer, it sounds like.
yeah, yeah, I know they were talking, because they're on the 3rd acre. They wanted to know, is there going to be a larger space behind them, prior to the denser housing starting? And I said, I thought so, but I would double check. And so this was just a little different. What I had understood, so.
One thing about doing, just my opinion, if you did do, like you said, Debbie, some that are 3rd and some that are half, does give a little mixed use. I think the patio homes are wonderful and they take care of them really well, the 55 and older. It doesn't really tend to though have any kind of younger families. Not even every retiree wants to live in a patio home, but if you at least had some 3rd acres, some half acres, we could maybe get still some younger families, because like the study said, people want somewhere for their children and grandchildren to be able to live. Or unless if we had some of the patio homes, not be all 55 and older, but I think my thinking would be maybe if you did more of them 55 and had the 3rd acre, like you said, Debbie, and the half acre, then at least that would afford to have some younger families if they wanted to, or even some older people that maybe didn't want to be in a patio home, but that wanted a little smaller lot.
Okay. Oh, and then we're.
Well, and that, is something else you can work on the developer too. Sometimes they can get a little higher density too, if there are some.
Sort of like.
so, yeah, Nelson Homes has some, they were in the news the other day out in.
At JDC Ranch,
Uh,
it's in Plain City. Well, it's unincorporated Weaver County, but yeah,
And then there's a.
well, it became Weaver County.
And they're, both of those, they're trying to get under 400, which absolutely amazes me. I mean, I used to think affordable was 67,000, now it's 400, but they're trying to get that price. And, but they probably need to do it PUD, they're gonna do it on a 3rd acre.
Yeah.
But they're following money from the state funds that was created for affordable housing for that project.
I don't think got any state funds for say.
It was on paid sale for the actually. It's the only,
Good thing.
it's the only project that needs full funds from that legislation. So.
Yeah, they had it's 1,000 homes, I think, and I can't remember. I think 300 and some odd had to be under 400, but that's kind of what they built out over there.
And I know we put another $20 million in the home code that allows for home buyers to take $20,000 and use it for their down payment or closing costs and for dividing the rate. So that got funded last year. So,
And again, I think this design was us really trying to thread the needle between some of the feedback we'd heard from the city and the community of having this buffer, but also aligning to the general plan of having affordable housing, which I think you're pointing out, which is really only attainable through some smaller lots and higher density, right? So this is where we thought, okay, this is kind of the best of both worlds for kind of achieving the general plan with the affordable housing component, which we kind of were leaving open to, we'll let the market decide if, older people want to move there, younger people want to move there. We didn't really see anything in the general plan that specifically called out like a retirement community. So we kind of left that open. But then also providing that buffer, but I think we're open to figuring out what's gonna be best and what the community and the city wants. I think we're happy to figure that out.
What other questions you guys have? We got 10 more minutes. I know there's some lingering ones, so let's get them
One
out.
question, just a simple one, the darker brown there, the R2, aren't there some houses there? Is that property becoming part of the project eventually or proposed to?
yeah, part of the family has land in that area And I think and help me out, Malcolm, that and landowners are here, so they'll know more than I know, but they're divided into 3 different parcels, but the parcel on the far north, I'm not sure the frontage of it actually meets the zone that it's in. And so in order to build on it, they would need to either rezone it or alter the frontage. So that was an effort to allow them to build on their property and be able to have half-acre zone so that they could meet the ordinances. And then we've talked to them about bringing another access through that ground onto 4700 to give better access into the project.
Yeah, that was my kind of what led to why I was curious about that. There will need to be another access there, so.
So that helped them with that, with a little bit of meeting the ordinance. And I don't want to speak for them, so they're behind me.
There was some concern at one time that there sort of will not be an access. There was a concern that there'd be an access on the west side coming up through that. So, yeah, but there is not one. Is that what coming in from the west?
Substreet there.
That's right next to that.
Yeah, there has to be one on the west, so that's where the sewer and everything else together. So.
Mhm. But I'd asked Jared about it. There has to be an egress, like you said, an egress and ingress, but it wouldn't be like a straight road going through. It would be more of a winding. So if it went into that, then it could be into a quiet neighborhood behind them to the east. It wouldn't be anything that would just be a straight through. So
The advantage of the access is it splits traffic, but the disadvantage is it does create, even though it's windy, creates a sort of constraint. So
mhm.
that's.
As long as we take care of the truck traffic, the commercial traffic out to the main road, there's really nowhere to go in there unless you're going home, so.
So we would fence the Smith's property, we always do. So there wouldn't be any traffic outside of the commercial.
This is all stuff we could work out in the development too, with, there'd probably be some traffic considerations, traffic studies, things of that nature that would help us determine more and then.
What do you feel like as a city council, you've had any of your questions answered? We can schedule and do another work meeting with you. We didn't really ever come up with anything. What they need to know is what you would like to see them present to city council as far as what this would be. I don't know if you feel like you've had questions answered, or like you say, we could always plan another meeting or.
So its impacts may just be great. Is there any way this project could be a little smaller, or does it have to be the full grandiose project?
It is kind of what it is. It's the acreage we're buying. So I don't know how to make it smaller. I think they'll handle.
Do you mean smaller, like, you know what I mean, acreage or?
Like the commercial area, could that be?
Like less, one less pad maybe or something?
Yeah, or something, could that be just squashed and squished down a little bit? It's just a very large project for the area. And I know that's a great concern to a lot of my constituents. And that was just one thing I thought I would throw out here.
In the original plan, we actually showed that there's one of the family members who's here that owns the house. I don't know if you can show it there. To the west,
This one right here?
no, at the west side.
Over here.
The acreage to the west, see all the acreage in
This-
there?
This one here.
We had all that acreage included in our plan and actually showed the commercial going over touching the residential. And, I didn't talk about her, but
That's okay.
But-
We have a concern.
But we've actually pulled it back, so I suppose you could say that it's already been made smaller. But it probably, in some people's mind, may not be small enough, but it made it small.
Okay.
And that may not help a lot.
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah, we went through quite a few conceptual designs to really optimize it and make it as, efficient as possible, and I think we've done our best on that front.
We did the project in Kaysville, and it's significantly smaller. Okay, so
Well, there'd be discussion, right? Like, maybe a parking study could be merited. We haven't had a traffic engineer ever look at this. UDOT may require one regardless. If we did a parking study, that would really determine, right? I understand visually it can look crowded, but if there's a parking study, it would help us understand, circulation study. I mean, there will be a lot of discussion on how does this flow and does it work? Those are all studies we could enlist and that I think staff would have some discussion with for sure.
Any other questions? We tentatively said we'd have a meeting for an hour and a half, thinking we could get through, and we're almost done with that, not meaning that we have to end right at 7:30. If you have any other questions or things you would like to discuss, this was really to give you a chance to ask them questions, you to give city council, so they have some direction which way to go. So,
I'll just agree with this. So I think the residential, I'm comfortable with, we've got enough flexibility, we can do something with that. So my big one now is just the CRA. Let's get creative, let's figure out how, because I don't want to forfeit the community's taxes, because that's basically what it is, we're just forfeiting our taxes to pay for that infrastructure. Yeah, other people will benefit, the city as a whole, will they benefit? I don't know. But they're required to forfeit some of that and, possibly have funds come out of our future budget to get this project up and going. So, I don't figure that together. I mean, but that's a big one for me. Just funding that, the taxpayers. That's,
The last slow station we put in was Pioneer agreement.
Yeah, Pioneer.
Boston Ranch was Pioneer agreement. It's everything.
and how do they feel? Like we fund this, we didn't fund theirs. I don't know, there's gonna be some tension in the city if that happens. I just know it is, just cause that was quite a big project for them. They flipped the bill, and they're gonna get paid back eventually. So,
And so I'm not, is that a commercial or or a
residential. Yeah.
Yeah.
How long is that for? 20 years? What that's for?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
I know
One thing I was thinking about, maybe I know you've already had LRB and maybe not that formal, but wondered if we met with some of these. When we do our impact fee analysis and study, we go to the financial component of that. They may have some ideas, be able to explain this better to us. I think there's a little bit of confusion because I was thinking about that. We want to be fair to the other developers that have just paid it and the residents who live there versus are gonna live here. But maybe we're only talking about what pocket we're taking that out of and putting it back into. If the impact fee comes in and goes back to Mr. Adams as the developer, like it is in that case, what's the difference if they just paid for it and we don't exchange all that money? I think so. Probably some learning to do about some of those.
So there is some other, and it's kind of, the CRA and the RDA was not allowed in residential. So the developer that came before us, and all they had was residential, they did not have a CRA or RDA tool. RDAs and CRAs have only been allowed in commercial. And then recently, they extended those if you do affordable housing, so they could apply to part of this residential side. So we can't do a CRA over the residential or an RDA over the residential. It has to be just for the commercial, unless you have affordable housing. There's really strict criteria, it has to be owner occupied and some other requirements if you do RDA or CRA for residential. So The difference is this is a commercial project and the it wasn't available to your residential use.
And that was part of the reason I asked, is it is a little bit of apples to oranges, pure residential project versus a commercial with some residential. So like our project is estimated to have a net impact of 7 to 14.5 million for the city. Based largely on the commercial versus purely residential is not gonna have quite as large of a net fiscal impact, positive effect for the city.
And that's why the RDAs weren't available for residential. They didn't want to incentivize something that didn't make revenue for the city.
And I would encourage the council to read that LRB study. I think they do a really good job and fair job of talking through that, and they make some pretty clear recommendations on what they think is either a benefit or not to the city. I think that'd be helpful to revisit.
How does that aspect work where, I mean, your project is the majority of that, that's a regional lift station that serves more than that's property. So those other properties are residential, do we have issues there with using a CRA? Does it have to be a certain percentage of it commercial or?
So it doesn't affect them at all because we're not taking their tax increment. So when those developers develop and they build a $1 million house on it, that $1 million house pays $5,000 in taxes. There's no withholding of that. It's only on the commercial development where the school district can get their tax for all their tax. They get some of it, 50 or 25% of it, which is more than they get if it was agriculture. So they actually get some benefit from it. It wouldn't affect the residential at all, nor would it affect our residential unless we get affordable housing.
Brian, how often did you say the fire district usually approves CRAs?
I think
Oh,
in 4 years, I've seen half a dozen, maybe.
Of CRAs. Did you see a different tax increment financing come before you more, or,
Different increments,
yeah, different to,
but I think we're asking for 70%.
no, I mean, like, you're saying you see CRAs, however often, you said 4, how often? Sorry.
Oh, maybe once every 6 months, if that.
Okay, do you see,
Once a year.
okay, do you see other, increment financing tools besides CRAs? No, they're mostly CRAs. We had a meeting the other day. On some work for Hooper Water, and the fire was here, and it was our fire district. So what was that chief's name? I don't remember, but they were real, familiar with it and very open.
He's on that board.
Oh, he is. Yeah. Yeah, he acted like it was pretty common hat for them to get in on one of these, but
Centerville City asked for the last one we approved.
That's probably like, I'm guessing the school district is the biggest.
it's kind of what they've said, yeah.
And have they been supportive in the past? The school district?
I'm not an expert on something. We don't do any on them, but we have, this is one of the. Yeah.
We did one in Washington Terrace, recently.
You
School
do
district.
more than I do.
Yeah, and the other is Stephanie Russell with the county. Has been to some of our previous meetings, and she's already indicated that county is supportive. So that's a pretty big hurdle right there.
Yeah, she's in the county would participate this year.
I think you may have already clarified this, but again, this CRA just involves your development. You don't reach out to other developments that's going to be using this lift station as part of that district or whatever you call it. Because that's something that I must have misunderstood when Stephanie was okay.
You could do that. I mean, the CRAs can be developed with different areas, but that is what we proposed.
Yeah, and the CRA, unless there were affordable housing element, it would only affect the commercial. That's the only.
Just the commercial property and the homes on that. Well,
The homes would not have their taxing would not participate. And so unless there, again, there was an exception made in the last, because we're trying to get affordable housing in the state, we're trying to use every possibly can. Trying to develop, and for the last 20 years, the developers haven't needed to buy, they needed to build on the first home buyers market, no one was building the 1,200 square foot 2-car garage or, even carport home because there was such a demand for the 3 and 4 car big homes that that product was not being built. And right now, there's not a lot of it available. And so with the demand so high for that type of product, the price has been astronomical, $500,000, which I can't hardly imagine that it's what it is. So the efforts try to get more affordable housing, more of that, like I said, patio home for first home buyers.
All right, we hit time. Appreciate you guys. City Council, thanks again a lot for coming out. We appreciate it and appreciate you guys making the drive out. And we probably ought to get used to more of these. I didn't mean to pop this on you guys last minute, but I mean, in a simple surveying of any of the surrounding cities, these work sessions they're normally about 4 or 5 deep with anything of this scale. Harrisville, Plaindale, this is kind of how we get them built out. So probably ought to start implementing a little bit more of this as we move forward to really flesh things out and try and get things a little bit more built out before you guys see them. I don't want you guys ever feeling surprised, right? Or like, I got to make a decision right now. And it's like, well, I don't know. I've only gleaned what I've gleaned. So we wanted it to be really transparent. So thanks again.
So I guess the question is, where would you like to go from here? Would you be interested in having another work session like this? Do you have any more information you would like them to bring? Anything else you would like to have time to look at?
Or we could application the way we have.
Yeah, we could work through their application as it is. It's kind of what we've done in some.
As this is? Because
Although,
4 acre lots and we.
Yeah.
4 acre lots.
Are we talking about changes?
yeah, we'd have to change it to third. Well, they mentioned they would, but yeah, I mean, the application would kind of be what, with the recommendation from Planning Commission, and we'd bring that as it was, and it'd probably, yeah, I don't know if I suppose they can make some alterations based off of the recommendation, and we could build it that way, but.
Well, that would be kind of my suggestion if you could, I'd like to see it try to do as much as you could to comply with what's been recommended from the planning commission. That's what they're doing. There's a way that some tribes that maybe hasn't been addressed could be. I think that would be a good thing.
So would you rather have us erase and maybe on the lines, the blue and the brown and make it all planned unit development as we come back? Or would you rather have us leave the blue and the brown? The blue be amended to 3rd acre and the brown staying at half. That would help us with the roof. I would say it's to the.
Yeah.
So that's a little different than the planning commission recommendation, but that's probably, and that's how we made applications. So that's how it would probably come anyway, unless we altered our application. So, because that's. Okay. You want another work meeting, or you would you like us to schedule it on a city council?
So everything would stay the same.
3rd
Yeah.
acre on the west.
Except 3rd acre problems.
And again, we're not having to make a decision right now, but we, any direction on what kind of work you'd like us to put into it, right? But I mean, I think we've got some, so.
No matter how we submitted it, you'd have, in our mind, maybe not in yours, but in our mind, there are enough questions, you'd have to have a development agreement. Because there's too many unknowns as to CRA, how to fund the lift station, how to do all these things. And we don't want to spend the money without somewhat of an implication. And you don't want us there if we can't solve the problem. So it's a way to make it contingent upon some of those things happening. So regardless of what we bring you, we're not going to bring you something and hopefully get just a blanket approval or disapproval. Hopefully we have something that has some ability to
least move forward.
to move forward and to try to solve some of the problems or negotiate or figure out what you want to have. So that's, if we brought that back, you'd still have those options. It's not exactly correct. You have those options.
Yeah, I think that would help us. The payments key for this product.
Sounds like we're all on the same page. It's the
Okay.
best we're gonna get. I'm going home. See ya.